Super excited to be here on another edition of NAMI Tennessee at Home Facebook Lives. We do this every single Monday. 2 p.m. Central, 3 p.m. Eastern. But you don't need me to remind you because you can sign up for the NAMI Tennessee email list. I know I say this every week. Do you know how excited I get when I see that somebody signed up because I said it? It's like proof of it's validating. It's validating for me. Well, I am really, really excited. It is my unique pleasure. We have an excellent show today. Dr. Shairi Turner is here. Oh, there, we're both on the screen, and she is super cool. Can you introduce yourself, Dr. Turner?
Yes, hello. Thank you, Gabe. I am so excited to be here. My name is Dr. Shairi Turner. I am the Chief Transformation Officer for Crisis Text Line. I am an internist and pediatrician by training, and I have a background in trauma and trauma-informed practices. And I'm so pleased to join everyone today.
My first question that I told you in the prep is now no longer my first question because it occurred to me that I don't know what a Chief Transformation Officer is, and I'd really like to.
Yes, so you're not the first one who was asked that question, Gabe, so I appreciate it very much. A transformation officer is someone who is part of an organization that's undergoing change. And right now, Crisis Text Line is seeking to meet the day, as many organizations are, to bring equity into the center of the workplace, infuse it throughout, and ensure that we have a diverse workplace as well as an inclusive workplace where we, like I said, infuse equity into what we do. And it's my responsibility to lead this effort, but along with a very committed and dedicated senior leadership team.
Well, thank you so much. I think that is super awesome. All right, let's get to the scripted questions so that we're all on the same page. Now, remember, during this broadcast, at any point in the comments, please feel empowered to ask your questions. I will look through them and we will pose them to Dr. Turner. Anything on the Crisis Text Line, we would she just loves letting people know what's going on, how you can use it. But I've got sort of what I feel are the three main questions. And the first one is, what is the Crisis Text Line?
So Crisis Text Line is a 24/7 free volunteer-powered crisis intervention service that is solely on a text platform. So anyone can text 741-741 and be received by a volunteer who is supervised by what we call crisis supervisors for any type of crisis for anything that an individual deems a crisis. So anything from homework for a teenager to feelings that you're going to hurt yourself or feelings that you want to end your life. We are available for anyone at any time for anything like that.
Now, you said that they're volunteers. What training do they go through? Do your volunteers go through to make sure that they can, handle the text that they do receive?
The rigors, yes. That's an excellent question, Gabe, because this is not for everyone as volunteers. We have a very rigorous first application process. And then once you get through the application process, which includes references, we have a 30-hour online training where we teach about crisis intervention, crisis de-escalation, how to source and work with how to work with a texter to establish coping strategies. So there's a whole curriculum that has been developed online, interactive, that the volunteer has to work through before they're able to actually be available to a texter.
I know this is kind of I'm thinking pessimistically, so I do apologize. But is there a test at the end of it? I mean, do people start and go through the rigors of the process, realize it's not for them, or does the Crisis Text Line say, look, I know you want to, but this is not for you?
Right. So there are people who do not make it through the training. I think many people have just wonderful giving hearts, but realize that working with other individuals in crisis can be triggering, right? So for those who may have a trauma history, working with others who are struggling in the moment and helping them to de-escalate is can be emotionally taxing. So some people do not complete the training. I want to add that throughout the training, there's a live coach. Everyone is assigned to a coach for support, for questions, and as they get through the training, if it seems, and then there's many simulated tests. So they have to pass through, and those tests are graded by their coach. So either people self-select out, or we realize at some point that that it's not a good match. We want people to feel supported as they volunteer so that they can help others who are in need.
Now, you sort of touched on this a little bit with the coach. I just kind of like to expand it a little bit further. It sounds like you have somebody, as the volunteer, there's somebody to support you in case something unexpected comes up or in case you're approaching burnout. And it sounds like there's also somebody watching to sort of, help you along with that. It's a supportive environment. At least
Yes.
That's how it sounds to me.
Yes. So you identified that correctly, Gabe. We have a coach who is there to support the volunteer when they are not on the platform. And when I say on the platform, it means when they're not actively engaging with a texter. So if they have questions, if their technology is not working, if there's any issue that they need support on off the platform, they have a coach. On the platform, during the course of working with texters, there's a crisis supervisor who has access to all of their conversations, can oversee the conversations, can help guide the conversations so that the volunteer never feels like they're alone or by themselves, because they are, these are lay people, right, who've been trained in crisis intervention services, but we recognize that these situations are serious and complicated. So we always have a crisis supervisor available there to assist.
That is beautiful. Thank you so much for clarifying that, or not even
It's a
clarifying,
great question.
just letting us know. I mean, it keeps everybody safe, right? I think that sometimes when we think about these things, we think about the safety of the people who are utilizing the service, but it's equally important for the safety of the people utilizing the service that the volunteer is stable, supported, healthy, happy, and
Yes.
watched over. So
Yes.
that is awesome. My next question, moving on, is why is the crisis text line needed? I mean, didn't we already have a phone number?
You did. It's interesting because we have become such a text-based society where being able to recognize that you need help, reach out to someone by text wherever you might be. So in the classroom, in the boardroom, in your kitchen, no one else has to know that you are seeking support. You can text 741-741, and I actually recommend anyone plug that into your phone and have it there in case you run into a crisis. But what makes it wonderful is it's accessible 24/7. You don't have to go off somewhere and find privacy to make a phone call because everybody's texting all the time, as we know. And you know that you have someone in your pocket basically available as a resource during times of crisis. So it's unique. It meets the day. We have a great deal of teenage texters, younger people, right, where text and phone is the main form, is an extension of the arm, right? So, but you have, I mean, it is like you have someone extended in your hand at any point when you're in crisis.
My grandfather, who is 90 years old, he makes fun of my wife and I because we'll be texting back and forth, and he'll be like, "Gabe, you're holding a phone. Just call her. You're holding a phone." And the reason that I bring this up is because I can't convince my grandfather that there is any point to texting. He just thinks that the world has gone off the rails. Now, I see it both ways. I think that sometimes, I think this way sometimes when people are getting into disagreements, when tensions are rising, when drama is occurring, I'm like, if you just pick up the phone, you'd solve this problem. That said, the younger generation, 16, they don't pick up the phone. That's not even something that's occurring to them. This is their primary way of communication. I make no judgment on that. We all have every generation has their idiosyncrasies. Do you see this as meeting this generation where they are? And is that a good thing?
Absolutely. Because we don't, if we were a nation that had therapists, equal accessibility to mental health services for everyone, then we would be looking at it differently. But we are not. We are still underserving so many individuals who need help. Our service, Crisis Text Line, actually over-indexes for people of different races who are underserved, who do not have access. We collect anonymous information at the end of our text if people are willing to if texters are willing to complete a survey. So we know that we over-index for Indigenous and Native American people, African Americans, LGBTQ, Latinx. So we're a resource for those, not just who want to have the ability to text, but also have no other mental health services. So we do skew towards younger people, but we have older individuals, 70s, 80s, who are texting as well. But to answer your question, it's meeting whoever wants to text where they are.
One, I want you. I wasn't going to say this, but really, 80-year-olds are. I think that's wonderful, and I really wish my grandfather was watching right now because I'd see. I told you that's your generation, buddy. You're just behind.
It's amazing to see how individuals respond differently, and that's why the traditional hotline, the pick up the phone and call hotline, is not going to go away because everybody approaches their crisis. Some people feel like they need to hear a voice, right? Where for others, sometimes hearing a voice can be off-putting, right? Because you start to listen for things and you've got to continue the conversation. Whereas by text, the texter has a lot of control, like they can pause when they want to pause and come back. So there's just so many ways. The most important thing for us at Crisis Text Line, and just on behalf of all crisis organizations, is meeting people where they are and getting them the help that they need.
Let's talk about that for a moment, that getting the help that they need. Again, running pessimistically, I think what help can be provided over a text message? Now, I want to be fair. A lot of people say that about, well, what help can be provided over the phone? Right. But what help can be provided over a text message?
Well, we have a whole series of the volunteer is trained both to assess for risk. So everyone who texts in, regardless of what they present with or that they claim is their crisis, everybody is assessed for risk of suicide so that we make sure we don't miss anyone who potentially has feelings of hurting themselves. Once we've established that that is not the case, then we go through and ensure we start to talk about what the issue is, right? Help the texter to identify, and sometimes it's just drilling down on what is making you feel like you are in crisis. Then helping them to establish and identify their own individual strengths, right? Like, what are the things that you can draw upon inside of yourself to help you through this crisis that may have helped you through other things in the past? And then, in fact, looking at coping strategies. What is it that as an individual can help you? Do you need to go, sit and relax or listen to some music? What are those elements to help you cope with this situation? And many individuals, we always give resources where relevant to to the texter. So the volunteer will send a text resource. If someone's struggling with anxiety, we can text them additional information, ways to meditate. So we always try to leave the texter both with strategies to cope as well as a resource to lean into after the text conversation is over.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. We have a question from the audience. Earlier, she said that she is so glad that you're here and that you're doing this. And she also asked, are people able to text anonymously? And I assume that she means because we're using our real phone numbers, and we all know what that looks like on the other end.
Right. So that's a great question because it's so important to many people that no one knows, right? So if you are in crisis, you don't want that information shared with your friends, with your family. And that's why you would choose a crisis text line, because it's completely anonymous, with the caveat that if you are at risk of hurting yourself or hurting someone else, we do have the ability to, through the network, to reach out to give you assistance, to send a wellness check through 911 and the public safety system. So yes, you are anonymous, but if you are in danger of hurting yourself, we do have ways of locating you based on your phone number, not necessarily your name.
So it sounds like, and I'm a little bit of a techie, it sounds like the handoff to your organization from the phone company blocks the number. So your organization only has the number if you meet a certain criteria, and the volunteer definitely doesn't have the number.
The volunteer does not have the number. And if, in fact, it gets to the point where we have to call the 911 call center, that is then handled by the crisis supervisor. So something as significant as that, the volunteer is happy to hand off, and the supervisor who has the experience will take over completely from there. So, and again, using the telephone number, not, asking for names. People sometimes offer their names, which is fine, but we are really about both keeping the conversations anonymous when we can and conforming to all HIPAA regulations, which we do.
Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Turner, Deborah has a follow-up question. A wellness check, is that the police, a counselor?
It really, since we're a national organization, it depends on what's accessible locally. So that would range from police officer, ambulance, mobile crisis unit. It really depends on what resources are in existence in each locale.
That makes perfect sense. I think that a lot of people, now not our audience, because we're all mental health advocates and we know what's going on, but a lot of people are surprised to find out that depending on not even your state, your zip code, literally if you live 20 miles away, you have access to better services than people who live in certain zip codes, counties, etc., because of the way the mental health system is. So I can imagine on a national level, you probably have an even wider range of services than people are seeing even state to state.
Yes. Yeah. So we, all of this is dependent on what resources are available, depending on where that person is physically located.
Wonderful. Thank you so very much. Now, I'm assuming there's another follow-up question who asked not to be identified, but the specific question was, does the crisis text line have the ability to pink slip people? And if you're not familiar, pink slip is 72-hour hold.
Right. So that would not be part of our purview or what we would do. So we get to the point, if someone is in that level of crisis, and we reach out to the 911 call center, they then dispatch to that person's home, and based on the up close situation, that determination is made. So where if an ambulance arrives and that the EMTs decide that this person is in such distress, that's where that decision making is occurs. But for us, we don't do that. We do identify imminent risk, and then reach out to get that assistance and wellness check, and then we have to kind of let it go from there, because we're not clinicians on the scene, and that's what would be important, that up close face-to-face assessment, which we
Very
can't.
good. Yeah, thank you so much. I know that there's always concern, especially in the mental health community. Well, what if I say X, or what happens, or who can, and it's trauma, right? It's we're a bunch of people that we don't always have our needs met just because we asked for it. So I want to ensure everybody that the crisis text line is looking to provide services, resources, and help. They're not lurking behind the scenes looking for words that they can. I mean, once again, trending negatively, it's a bit of a hassle, right? I mean, you'd rather meet people where they are, help them, and give them the resources they need. Trying to call 911, figure out where they are. That's not a goal, just because it's not efficient.
Well, it's also not that frequent. So amazingly, because our volunteers and our crisis supervisors are so well trained and well equipped, only 0.1% of our conversations actually go to what's called an active rescue, where we feel the texter is in such danger that they need to have us call 911 to come support them. So the majority of our calls are actually de-escalated, where people come down to a more calm state. They're given the resources, and they end the text, right? So successfully. So it's rare that a situation gets to that point, but no one's lurking in the background. I think everybody ideally wants the conversation to be able to be de-escalated by text, and for the person to feel better and move on.
That's awesome. Now we have a sort of a two-part question. Oh, whoops. I hit the wrong button. I apologize. There we go. The first question is, what is the phone number for the crisis text line, which I just had on the screen a moment ago, but the question after that I feel is relevant. What is it for teenagers?
Yes. So once again, I offer everyone the opportunity right now to plug into their address book 741-741. And that is all you have to text. And you can text any word. So help or Tennessee, you can text any word to just initiate that first text to 741-741. The second part of the question, is it for teenagers? Absolutely. We have a cohort, as I mentioned, in terms of our post-conversation surveys, we know that we actually serve texters under the age of 13. On the one hand, that's sad that we have children in crisis, but on the other hand, we're able to serve them and help them. So yes, definitely for teenagers, and it's obviously texting is a teenage modality, means of communication. So we are there to meet teens where they need to be met.
Deborah is hot today. She asks if specific to Tennessee, and I'm just going to answer that one real quickly so we can get to our next one. Nope, it's national. Now, is it international?
It is.
Nice.
So we have what we call affiliates. So thank you for all your questions, Deborah. We appreciate you. So we have affiliates where in the UK, Ireland, and Canada, I'm sorry. So UK, Ireland, Canada, we have affiliates that we support, but they're not connected. So when someone is in the UK, they would not text in and receive a US volunteer. They're receiving UK volunteers, but core components of our training is generated here, powered here, and supported here for our international affiliates. So it's not as individual as a franchise, because we're developing the curriculum in conjunction with them so that we can ensure the service is available. We are also going to be launching later this year a U.S. Spanish service so that we can serve Spanish-speaking texters, which is, we're hugely proud of the fact that we'll be able to do that.
That's incredible. Now, Deborah also has another question. Unlike a phone
Go,
call where the
Deborah!
user, yeah. Unlike with a phone call where the user can hang up, how does someone end the text conversation? Are there guidelines for when they can respond to a text? And I just want to build on that question a little bit. How long does it take to get a reply?
It really depends. We follow kind of our key performance indicators are around response time less than 5 minutes. So we ideally are targeting getting our texters served in less than 5 minutes, but there are wait times, just especially during what we call spikes. So times when the nation is in crisis, we see spikes, and there can be longer wait times. But the way that you end a conversation is by either texting stop, which immediately stops the conversation. As you can imagine, if someone is in a place where they no longer feel is private and they want to clear the conversation so that no one can be looking over their shoulder or have an awareness of who they're texting or what they're texting about, they can text stop. And they will not receive another, it sort of takes them out of the system, and they will not receive another text if they need to, be quiet or not have anyone know that they're texting about a crisis. And then, are there guidelines for when they can respond to a text? The volunteers are very patient. If someone needs to, to wait, but we'll check in unless they've texted stop. But if there's a prolonged period of silence, we kind of have a protocol for like checking in. Are you okay? Are you still there? Sometimes people will fall asleep. The text will wake them up, and they'll finish the conversation. But if it goes after a repeated number of check-ins, then the conversation will end. But that person can always come back at any point and text in again.
Now so let's say that I text into the crisis text line, and we have a nice ping back and forth, and then an hour goes by and I don't respond. I don't reply stop. I don't respond. Like you said, if I fell asleep or I sat my phone down, at some point does a message come through that says you're welcome to text at any time, but this particular conversation is over.
It's closed out. Yeah.
Perfect. And then so that leads me to my next question. Is it truly one-on-one? Is it when I'm texting with somebody, am I texting with a single volunteer, or is that volunteer juggling 15 other people?
So you are texting with one volunteer. You are one-on-one, and that volunteer can have maybe 1 or 2, maybe 3 conversations at one time. But generally, most volunteers feel most comfortable and responsive in the one-on-one. So you are not like part of a phone bank where the volunteer has 50 different conversations at once, because we really want the volunteer to not be keeping the texter waiting. Sometimes the texter may pause, but we want to help the volunteer to be as available and responsive to the texter. So a volunteer would not be carrying and texting with, tens of different texts. You know what I'm saying? Like that is not the type of service or attention that we would want.
Wonderful. Now, April Jacobson says, what is the average wait time? I assume she means probably from the first text to getting the first response.
It really depends. And I apologize. I don't have that specific data, like averages off the top of my head. But what we do track is the number of, we try to keep them under 5 minutes. But there have been times when the nation is in crisis, the nation is texting in, and it can be over an hour before the the volunteer, we have enough volunteers, right, to get to that next texture. So I don't, off the top of my head, I have a lot of data, but I don't actually have our average wait time. But I can get that to you, Gabe, if you write that down, and I can get that back to your.
Absolutely. But
yes.
it sounds like, while you don't have the exact number, it looks like the goal is under 5 minutes,
Yes.
which happens the majority of the time. But obviously, what is that joke? The wait time at McDonald's is 10 minutes, unless it's right after a football game.
Right.
Then it's an hour.
Right. It is. It's and we see spikes. We really are an indicator of the nation's crisis burden. So, around the election, around, some of the protests, around the pandemic, there have been spikes, and we see that people reach out and they're in need. And our volunteers are amazing. We've trained over 35,000 volunteers. So we'll have as many as, 8 to 10,000 active volunteers at one time, but sometimes the volume of texters is far greater than that. But yes, our goal is to get to people in less than 5 minutes.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Turner. So how did this all come about? I was sitting here thinking about it, and is it just the natural extension of, hey, we used to write letters, then we got phones, so now we use phones, now we have texting, now we do that?
I suppose so. So it's meeting the day, right? So
Right.
meeting the needs of the time. It actually, Crisis Text Line started almost 8 years ago as an arm off of DoSomething.org, which is actually a volunteer-powered organization, really an organization that mobilizes volunteer activities. But it was doing so through a text platform, but pushing out texts, right? So come volunteer for this, push out, push out. But then they found that some teen was texting back, indicating that they were in crisis. And that kind of sparked this idea with our founder about is there another service for people to text in to get support? And quite honestly, that's where we started back in 2013. And it's just built from there. It took off from there.
It just went like gangbusters.
Yeah.
I can absolutely see how this would be incredible. And I also know that even myself, I'm 44 years old, and I've called the National Suicide Hotline. It's daunting, right? There's a person there when you're waiting for the phone to ring, if you are in the queue, if they're busy. There's like, well, what's that person going to sound like? Are they going to be mean? What if I don't like it? Am I allowed to hang up? And I imagine that some of that, these are my words, I imagine that some of that is alleviated with texting. Now, are there other things to worry about? Are there other barriers, even with texting, that people need to be aware of or that people struggle with? Because we want to remove as many barriers as possible, right?
Right. And really just acknowledging, the partnership in the space with the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, that, that is a resource for many people who want to hear a voice, right? But barriers to texting, obviously, we try to make and train the volunteers to be as receptive as possible. So asking open-ended questions. The thing that misses in any text, right, is whether we're texting our friends, our family, tone, right? How do you account for tone? How do you make it feel warm, right? So that is a piece that we work with our texters on, like how to sound warm and supportive and empathetic through a text modality, right? And our texters are, hopefully will hear that, quote unquote, hear that through the text and feel that support through the text. But it's an art, right? So it's just teaching about how to be empathetic and how to be supportive, ask open-ended questions so that no one feels inadvertently put off by, a volunteer who's actually trying to help.
The comments are filling up with people asking what the crisis text line number is. It's home to 741-741. So I want to pop that up and answer it just en masse for everyone.
Yes.
Now, one of the things that I've seen, and you've already answered this question earlier, but I'm going to ask it differently. You said that people can text anything. So you've already answered, they can text anything to 741-741 and it'll go through. So you've already sort of answered my question, but I see like a lot of nonprofits, including NAMI, where they'll have advertising that says text NAMI to 741-741. Does anything different happen if a word other than home comes in?
There's no different experience for the texter, right? So the texter will have the very same experience if they text NAMI, if they text Tennessee, if they text home. It's really a way to initiate, right? So you have to send something to start a text. But what it does, let's just say for NAMI Tennessee, if there was what we call a keyword that was like NAMI, right? Then any data that's gathered from those post-conversation surveys on that text, NAMI could have access to if they were interested in that partnership. So it really allows organizations that advertise, right, using a certain keyword, or cities use it, states use it, so that they can have specific data from these texts to meet the needs of their communities. So it allows for the data to be used in a way that supports a given community, because the community can identify, or the organization can identify, who's texting in based on our advertisement or where we're located. So for the texter, they get the same great experience. For whoever is trying to support texters in a given area, they have that information.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much. But just to be completely clear, you can text anything. You can text
Anything.
question mark, exclamation point. It'll get it all started.
Yes.
Perfect. That makes perfect sense. Now, Deborah would also like to know, how does someone become a volunteer?
So thank you, Deborah. We love our volunteers. We cannot do this without our volunteers. So crisistextline.org is our website, and it's pretty clear on there where you can go to sign up to be a volunteer. Right now, we're working on our training. We're revamping. We're making our training more culturally competent and culturally fluent. So it may take a little while to get through the application process before you can actually become a volunteer, but definitely start by going to the website, crisistextline.org.
That is, I tried to type it in, but I failed miserably. It's crisistextline.org. Perfect. Yeah, yes. ORG. I've made that mistake before with the .coms.
We're .org.
.org. Thank you so much, Deborah, and thank you so much, Dr. Turner. Now, do you have enough volunteers? Is it, you talk about under 5 minutes and crisis trends, etc. And of course, volunteer means free. Is it difficult to find enough volunteers, or has this not been an issue?
So interestingly, during the pandemic, we had more volunteers than we had texters, because people were at home and interested in serving and helping others. And it was just a beautiful thing to see, to know that the country recognized that there were going to be texters and people wanted to volunteer. Wow. Generally, it's a slightly different balance where we're actively looking, always wanting volunteers, because again, you have to think it's an emotionally intensive volunteer opportunity, right? This is not, going to Habitat for Humanity and going out and building things. There's an emotional investment, and we always want our volunteers to take the time they need if they feel like they need a break. But that's why we're always sourcing new volunteers. Like I said, we've trained over between 30 and 40,000 volunteers. They're not all active now, but they can come back and reactivate, or looking for new people who are interested in helping. It really has to fit in with your life and your lifestyle. But what's wonderful is if, you have a laptop, you can be a volunteer.
It sounds like I this is a really stupid question, so don't make fun of me, but I sort of had this like boiler room pictured of a whole bunch of people sitting in a great big auditorium with their little phones. But you're right. People are working out of their own homes and their own spaces. Like you said, if you have a laptop, you're set. What does the experience look like on the other end?
Right. So the volunteer, and I want to, just for those who are new, there is an application process. You don't and a training process. So it's not just as simple as having a laptop, but you will be on the laptop. You won't you won't be texting with the texters on the phone. The volunteer is on the laptop so that you're able to see really clearly the conversation. So the interface, we create our own products. We have our own data and technology teams. So we're forever working on that better interface so that the volunteers have a great experience and find it as easy as possible to communicate with the texters. So it's not the volunteer trying to see their phone. It's actually the volunteer on their laptop and the crisis supervisor in the background, all over, and no one's in a room. That's the beauty, right? Everybody's connected in from all over the country to serve that texter.
That is, I'm still laughing at that. I thought there was a boiler room with a whole bunch of, in my mind, they were also all millennials and they were just all sitting like on their little phones, staring at it, running.
Right.
Yeah, that was.
But some people, interestingly, for those who volunteer with friends, I wouldn't be surprised if, a group of friends got together and they all happened to be volunteers in a certain area and set up a room and took conversations. That is not unheard of. And we really like to support our volunteer community. And back prior to the pandemic, we had meetups so that our volunteers in locations, around each other could meet and kind of share their love for serving texters. So we adore our volunteers and recognize that it's important to support and enhance that community. So texters, volunteers do sit together at some point, I'm certain, obviously protecting the confidentiality of the texter, but finding, comfort and community together.
Very nice. Dr. Turner, we've talked a lot about where the crisis text line came from, how it was formed, what the goals are. What does the future look like? I know this sounds like I'm interviewing you for a job now, but where do you see yourself in 5 years?
Right. Where will crisis text line be? So very important to us is recognizing our Spanish speaking texters and the fact that there is not a national organization that provides bilingual services. So key to us right now, and our primary focus is around the Spanish language launch. So we have bilingual crisis supervisors. We're going to have bilingual volunteers so that we can serve our Latinx community in the language that is native to them. Beyond that, we are, as an organization, exploring what our next steps are for global expansion, right? So UK, Canada, Ireland made sense because they were English speaking, but we do want to look at what other, while maintaining the level of service that that our texters expect, where can we expand internationally and support international communities who are in crisis?
Thank you so much. It's really incredible to think of everything that has been accomplished in what really is a short period of time. Is there anything that you credit that to, or is it just, hey, we're lean and mean and on the scene?
We have staff who are really committed to the work that we do. We have volunteers who are committed to the work that we do. I think because we are powered by our own data and technology and product, we're not limited. So if we see the need to improve the service, we're not reliant on some other company to upgrade our platform, right? We do all of that in-house. So that allows an agility that allows us to try something, see how well it works, iterate, fix it, put it out there again, fix it. So it's that provides us with the agility, the fact that we're not a large organization. We actually only have about 170 full-time staff, and everyone's remote at this point. But we're really committed to being agile and meeting texters and supporting them. So it's really having everything in-house and not depending too much on outside sources.
Another question that came up is how are you funded? If everything is free, you've got to pay those 170 people.
Right, and then some. Right, so we are primarily funded through through contributions, through initially started out in our founder is a social entrepreneur. So the tech, the data, all of the venture capitalists saw the value in what we do. We're continuing to exist off of those level of contributions, as well as new partnerships. So partnerships with Netflix, partnerships with Nike, where we're not, like for Netflix, a support, right? A support for organizations that need to have a resource for their employees, for their staff. Crisis text line can be that. We also partner and provide a volunteer opportunity for organizations that want to offer something like that to their employees. Like if you work at a certain organization and the organization sees value in the volunteer experience, let's partner with Crisis Text Line because we know the services that they deliver and our employees would be interested in that.
Oh, that's awesome. And then the next question I have, which I can't believe I didn't think of on my own, is if you don't want to volunteer, how can we support you?
I do believe on our webpage there's a site for donations. So that's one way to support us. Talking about Crisis Text Line with, within your own organizations, within your family, letting people know, getting the word out is a way to support us as we support texters. So the more people who know about Crisis Text Line, the more we get those services out to people in need. So you don't have to volunteer. You can donate, or you can just spread the word. When someone you see is not doing well, ask them how they're doing, ask them how you can help them, and offer them Crisis Text Line as a resource, even if it means you sit there and text with them, right? Sometimes the factor of much of desolation and feeling depressed and down and in crisis is about feeling alone. So to sit with someone and say, I recognize you're not yourself. Let's text Crisis Text Line because I've got it plugged into my phone, right? Let me make that connection for you, and you sit here and text and see what we can do to kind of get you into a better space.
I really like what you
question.
Yeah, thank you. I really like what you said there. Obviously, passing out the number is very helpful, and we sort of miss that, right? We're all trying to do these high-level things, and we forget that just telling people word of mouth is so powerful. But I really like what you said about being supportive of somebody doing it. People are afraid. They're afraid of new things. They're afraid to try something for the first time. They're just afraid, period. And if the people around them are like, well, I don't know if that's going to work, that can literally be a bigger barrier than so many things that we think of as big barriers.
Yes.
Whereas if somebody's like, well, give it a try, I'll sit here with you. Or, well, why don't you try it? And tonight at dinner, we'll talk about how it goes. I bet it's going to go great, right? That can be the push that somebody needs to give it a try.
Yeah,
People in
that can
crisis are
save a
watching.
life. That can save a life one way or the other to know. And it's an important point you made, Gabe, because I think people feel reticent or afraid about asking someone they know if they're not okay, right? And it's so key to realize you don't have to be a therapist to ask that question. You just have to say to that person, hey, I can tell like you're not acting like yourself. You know, you're I'm not hearing from you as frequently. I'm here for you, right? Are you thinking about hurting yourself? Are you thinking about suicide? And it's easier for someone to say, yes, I'm thinking about hurting myself than to initiate that conversation, right? To be sitting at coffee, sipping your latte and then say, hey, I've had thoughts of killing myself, right? That's a hard plate. That's a barrier for someone. But if you show that empathy as a friend or a family member and say like, something's not right, I don't know what it is, but I'm here for you. Like, are you thinking? And that person can just say, yes, I am. And then you've got crisis text line on your phone. Let me sit here while we get you some support, right? That can be the difference between life and death.
Very true. When people call in, do you ask them their age? I only ask because of liability issues or confidentiality issues for teenagers. I mean, if somebody is 16 years old and their parents call up and demand to know what they talked about, I know that's kind of an involved question, but what does that look like?
So we don't ask up front. We treat everyone's crisis as its own individual crisis, unless it appears that it's a mandatory reporting situation where like a minor is reporting abuse. So that would be a situation where we would start to ask questions about age if we suspect that the teenager is a minor and that we need to file because we are mandatory reporters. So that is where we would, and after a conversation in the post-conversation survey that goes both to the volunteer and to the texter, we ask them to volunteer their age just again so that we can understand for who we're serving. But the time in a conversation where we would delve into that would be if we felt like a volunteer was working with a minor and there was a risk, the minor, the teenager was at, or the child was at risk, and we needed to get that kind of service going for them. We would ask age. But otherwise, teenagers have the same privacy on their phone as adults.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, I know that we are almost out of time, and I want to make sure that if there is any last words, any information that you want people to have, that you have this time, Dr. Turner, because you've answered so many questions, but I want to make sure that you get everything into the hands of our audience that they need to have.
Yes. Well, first of all, thank you, Gabe, because you created just a wonderful avenue for us to talk comfortably about Crisis Text Line. And I hope that if you didn't know about us, you now do, that you share the information, that you use the information, that you know that there's no stigma in asking for help. There's no risk in asking if someone else needs help. And that Crisis Text Line, if you are someone who texts, is always available, either for you as an individual for support or as a volunteer. If you're interested in helping, we are here.
That is wonderful. Thank you so much. All right, one more time. What is the crisis text line phone number, and how do they access it?
Yes. Take out your phones, please. Click your address book, please.
Yeah.
In the address, put Crisis Text Line and 741-741. And that way, when you go to your phone and you go to text and you put in Crisis Text Line, you can text anything: help, home, NAMI, me, doesn't matter. But whatever you need to text to get it started, please do that. Help, you can text. But have it in your phone because we never know. It doesn't have to be a life or death situation. It can be a relationship. We have people who text in about loneliness, about depression, about homework, about relationships, about eating disorders. Really, like it doesn't, you do not have to feel like, well, is this really a crisis? If it's a crisis to you, if it's keeping you from doing what you need to do as an individual, text in for help.
Dr. Turner, thank you so much for being here. Right before we go, I want to tell everybody, and I do this every time, you all should be tired of it by now, sign up for NAMI Tennessee's email list. Just go to namitn.org. We send about one a week.
Right.
Yeah, see, Dr. Turner's even getting into it. And then you'll be reminded of all of the cool things we do. NAMI's email list is awesome. It's curated content. It's really cool, and it reminds you of awesome things like this, which we do every Monday. All right, are you ready to get out of here?
Gabe, you're great. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Wave, everybody. Bye.